Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another edition of Indexer Office Hours. Today is what is it, the 16th? There you go, 16th of April, and this is Index Office Hours 153. Thank you all for joining us today. For those of you who are new to this, today's the 47th of April. I love that. For those of you who are new to Index Office Hours, this is the town square for graph ecosystem participants to come together and discuss the most important and relevant topics for indexers. This is a conversation. We love participation. So if you'd like to get involved in today's conversation, which will be a very conversational one, please get involved via the text box, which many of you are already using at the moment, or try unmuting a mic. And if you're having any challenges, let me know and I will get that sorted for you. As a reminder, this is going to be recorded and posted onto public channels like YouTube. So if you are concerned about privacy, please bear that in mind. And with that, let's get into today's agenda. So, thank you. Thank you. Always appreciate a nice round of applause. Thank you very much, Mike. Appreciate that. So as for opening remarks, we have our good friend Ariel, who doesn't really need an introduction. But for those of you who don't know, Ariel is the VP of Engineering at 𝗨𝗀𝗧𝗧. Ari has been an incredible contributor into the graph ecosystem for a long time. But more specifically, he in this podcast, he speaks about the recent move, which many of you are already aware of, from the graph being on mainnet L1 to Arbitrum. So it's a very interesting podcast where he talks a bit about that journey. He's an OG and someone who we deeply respect in the ecosystem. So if you're interested to hear about a bit about the move and a bit about his story, I would highly recommend going and checking out the episode, which has been posted in the channel. Thank you so much there, Juan, for both the agenda and the episode. Alrighty, with that, I'm going to hand over to Anna for our regularly scheduled Repo Watch section.
Thank you, Abel, and hello everyone. So today on Repo Watch, starting with execution layer clients, we have had two new releases from Firehose Ethereum. From the least recent one, so version 2.4.3. This contains some fixes, so fixes memory leak on substream execution, removes the need for substream tier 1 block type auto detection, fixes handling of distore error in tier 1 exec out walker, plus a few other fixes. And then there's another release here, so this is version 2.4.4. This fixes a possible panic when a request is interrupted to the file loading phase of the squashing operation, and fixes a rare possibility of stalling if only some full KV stores caches were deleted. So please check both of those out. And next we have had a new release for Avalanche. This is version 1.11.4. In general, it adds finer grain tracing for MerkleDB try construction and hashing. It removes a bunch of metrics from each chain ID. It fixes P2P SDK handling of canceled app request messages and fixes MerkleDB crash recovery. And this is all we have for execution layer clients. Moving on to consensus layer clients. There is nothing new here. So then on the graph stack, we have had a new release of GraphNode. This is version 0.35.0. Some important mentions. It adds declarative aggregations defined in the subgraph schema, allowing the developers to aggregate values on specific intervals. It also adds pause and resume to admin JSON RPC API. So support for explicitly pausing and resuming subgraph deployments with the field called indexer statuses. and it supports it-get balance calls in subgraphs. Mappings, it adds parallel execution of all top-level queries in a single query body, and it has a few other improvements. So pruning performance improvement, improving error logging, and those are the main things that you need to know about. We have been running GraphNode, this version on 𝗨𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀 𝗟𝗶, and it is running without any issues. And this is all I have for this week. So thank you very much. And over to you, Juan.
Awesome. Thanks, Anna. So getting into Protocol Watch, we have a few things to cover. First of all, forum governance as always. Add support for BEVM mainnet. Again, it's one of those threads for adding support for another chain. It just added the base information to run it. Not entirely sure if someone is already trying to run it, but yeah, that's what it is. For forum research, we don't have new updates since last IOH this time. For the contract repository, we have the same PRs that have been last week. All of them are work in progress, are experimental changes related to Horizon. This includes, staking changes, the subgraph data service, escrow and payments, and so on. For the network subgraphs, we do have a new update, a new release of the core network subgraph, which includes L2 tests, fixes to the allocation status, and start block for manifests. This is version 1.1.0. It's going to be relatively soon published to the network. We have to find some time to publish it along with Fort, but it's going to be released on the network probably after IOH. So yeah, that's pretty much it for Protocol Watch. I'm not sure if Paka is here this time. Yes, I can see Paka. So over to you, Paka, for Project Watch.
Just as I was writing a message to someone. Give me 1 second. Yeah, I'm here. So really mainly just hyped on v35.0, still riding that high of release and trying to keep the excitement going. We're planning a release in the next, I want to say, week or two. So follow up to this. We've been hard at work in the shadows, just building stuff, and just want to tease one of the features that will be coming out that we're kind of excited about. Declared ETH calls, so really just parallelizing ETH calls behind the scenes when possible, and this should really help certain use cases of making subgraphs faster. So pretty hyped on this. Some other things coming in the release too, but just wanted to briefly tease this. And yeah, sorry Pinex, ahead of time. Yeah. That's it. Yeah, it's a short one this week. Yeah.
Gotcha. Thank you very much. It's lovely to have you back, Packer. Just if Anna's still here, I want to turn your attention to a question that was part of the Repo Watch section. Matthew asked, is it recommended for deployment on the network yet? Just if you could loop back on that, Matthew, and mention, catch us up on what you were asking there. Maybe Anna can help you out.
I understand the question. I haven't seen any notice not to be that says otherwise. So I think it's safe to run on any mainnet. There's no notice, and it's a full version.
Sorry to jump in, Anna, but that's not my understanding. I think for 𝗨𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀, like the mainnet, as in the mainnet of the graph, not Ethereum. What matters is the ratified feature matrix, and that is basically the yeah, I dropped a link to it in the chat. I'd encourage everyone to have a look, and you'll see there's basically a list of networks like Arbitrum-1 and Cello and Avalanche, and basically all of the networks that are supported on the decentralized network, as well as which features are supported for those networks. And then there's also a version constraint for GraphNode. And the most up-to-date one is any version of GraphNode that is greater than or equal to 0.34.1 and less than 0.35. So it's exclusive of the 0.35 release. And so I think what this means is that if, as an indexer, you were to get into some dispute, and the cause of that dispute was that you were running 0.35.0 on Arbitrum-1, you would be liable to be slashed because it's not like a ratified release for mainnet yet. So it's definitely something that is encouraged to run on testnet. But I think technically speaking, GraphNode updates must flow through the governance process and the feature support matrix.
Thank you, Chris. That makes a lot of sense. I also agree with Vincent that it should be marked as pre-release or something like that, so it's more clear for everyone. But yeah, we'll keep on checking this snapshot, but thank you for the clarification.
All righty, wonderful. Appreciate that. Next, we have Juan, who's going to tell us a little bit about the QoS Oracle. I believe there are some updates he has to share with us, and I guess we have time also for some Q&A after that as well. Yes, Juan.
Yep. I'll be sharing my screen 1 second.
Awesome.
Juan.
Yes, we did it. I love that sound effect. Yeah, it's great, Chris. I love it.
Cool. Let me know if you can all see my screen.
Just loading for me now. Yeah, we can see it.
Awesome. So first of all, thank you all for coming here. We are going to be discussing / chatting about some ideas that we're working on for what we're calling QoS Oracle v2. The naming might be slightly weird when we get into the details. You'll get to know that in a second, but that's what we went with, and I think it's the most appropriate naming for it. Okay, getting into the situation. First of all, I want to kind of like share the current situation of what I'm going to be calling QoS Oracle v1. So as many of you know, the gateway or gateways are being run by Edge and Node currently. It's the only core developer that's running gateways, mainly because it's the first gateways were run by them, and they're continued to doing so. And as many of you know, data is being reported by these, mainly QoS data is being reported by these gateways, and the data that's being reported from the gateways goes from the gateways through their data science pipeline, which is slightly complex. I'm going to get into that in a second. The QoS data points from the pipeline gets posted on chain. In this case, the strategy that they use is they are, given that the data itself is quite heavy, it's not ideal to post everything on chain as a call data or something along those lines. So what they are doing is publishing it to IPFS as a file. Each of those files include, a bunch of data points for different indexers or different subgraphs, depending on which type of topic it's being posted. And that IPFS hash then is posted on Gnosis Data Edge contract that has a few other metadata, fields. It's basically a JSON string as a bytes that's being posted in the Gnosis Data Edge contract. And then all of that data is picked up by the QoS subgraph from the data edge, and then it's exposed as what you know as the QoS subgraph. Many of you probably have interacted with it. If not, many of you have seen the data on 𝗨𝗂𝗟𝗶. It's basically where we're picking that up. Kind of like a way to see this current situation is this. There's the gateways expose some data through Kafka messages, which are then, in the case of this current scenario, which again, we're calling QoS Oracle v1, but it's not an Oracle because it's not, it's just kind of like repurposed data science pipeline. Some parts of the processing is being taken and exposed on chain. So currently how it works, kind of like the flow is you have the gateway, which has Kafka messages coming out, which are then picked up by Materialize and DBT. Then some post-processing happens at the Materialize step, which kind of like aggregates some of those Kafka messages into 5-minute intervals of data for indexers, for subgraphs, for I think also for users. And then a cron job after 5 minutes or whenever those buckets are ready is going to be posting that data on IPFS and letting the OpenSeppling Defender know that a transaction has to go through to the Gnosis data edge with all of the IPFS hashes that are supposed to be handled afterwards by the subgraph. So yeah, this is basically a visual representation of how the current data science pipeline is being used for this QoS Oracle, so to speak. What are the issues with this? Well, one of the known issues is that it's quite complex to properly set up. Again, this is not a standalone QoS Oracle. It's just reusing some already existing pipeline for data science to report some QoS data. One of the issues with this is that you have to set up Materialize, you have to set up DBT Materialize, you have to also have a cron job running somewhere to pick up all of the data and push it to IPFS. Then you also have to set up Defender to send the transactions. So it's kind of like a little bit messy. Again, it's mostly being done this way because it wasn't originally intended for QoS data reporting, but rather for data analytics analysis from the data science team for Edge and Node. And once people figured out, okay, it would be great to have QoS data on chain and freely available for anyone. They basically took what they already had working and kind of like repurpose it. One of those issues that arise from this particular scenario is that the reporting pipeline, so to speak, is deeply coupled with how Edge and Node is running their gateway, which is not ideal in the case where anyone else but them wants to run a pipeline. So we've been discussing with Edge and Node, with Craig, with Ricky, with Theo, ways that we can improve a little bit on this to make it easy for anyone that wants to eventually run a gateway to be able to run their own QoS reporting tool. Also, one of the issues that we faced when we were working with 𝗨𝗂𝗟𝗶 is that there were a few things that we wanted to expose that were not available in the subgraph, and the reasons that they weren't available in the subgraph is that the base layer, so basically everything that's coming from Kafka or that's coming from the post-processing pipeline didn't have those fields available. Stuff like improved fields for some of those things that we're going to be discussing with the B2 aspect. Okay, so we kind of like, with all of this discussion, we kind of like figured out, okay, we want to build a standalone Rust-based Oracle that takes care of all of the relevant QoS reporting steps from this data science pipeline without having to run those, services like Materialize, like having a cron job, like having Defender and everything else. For that, we basically want to have just a single Rust-based Oracle that takes care of all of those things, which should be possible given that we're not going to be having all of those extra steps for the data science outputs. Another thing that we realized is that we would need to improve or enrich the Kafka messages to support some of the subgraph schema changes that we want. Mainly, one of the issues that we find is that there was no, way of. So basically, the existing subgraph only has the notion of index chain, so the chain that the subgraph is indexing data from, and a gateway ID, which isn't entirely unique. Sometimes it just refers to, for example, it could be gateway ID testnet, and it just refers to the edge and node testnet gateway, which supposedly has all of the data for, I don't know, 𝗨𝗀𝗃𝗵 or 𝗨𝘀𝗲𝗂 or 𝗀𝗀𝗃𝗀 now. But we want to, expand it a little bit so that we have the index chains, also the chain that the graph network is running on for that particular data point, as well as unique identifiers for the gateway, so that any instance of a gateway would be differentiated in the data that we're going to be posting on chain. We also want things like normalized lag metrics, and by lag I mean we currently have blocks behind. Blocks behind is not super useful for comparing across different chains. Like Arbitrum and Ethereum don't have the same, a single block in each of those those chains don't really mean the same. So comparing blocks behind across many data points doesn't really make sense currently. So having something like time behind, which is chain agnostic, would be potentially a lot better. Or another type of normalized metric if we can find another one. Also add some improved Oracle post-processing for new stats, kind of like maybe have percentiles on some of the relevant statistics like latency, success rate, and some others. And, briefly, showing this is we're going to go from, the 3 steps into a single Oracle, Rust-based Oracle setup, which should be a lot easier to set up. It should just, get where am I going to get the Kafka messages from, or consume the Kafka messages, and some way of posting IPFS data and kind of like an address or something, and a light node to post data to the data edge Arbitrum 1 deployment. Also, as we are doing some changes to the the service that's going to be posting stuff on chain and changing the schema of the data itself, we will need to have some QoS subgraph changes as a requirement. This includes, improving the schema of the subgraph to support those new fields from the Kafka messages, as well as any new fields that come from the post-processed data points from the Oracle, and as well as some potentially new QoS data grouping entities. Currently, we have stuff like subgraph or query, as we call it, data points, and we also have allocation data points, which would be kind of like the indexer subgraph relationship. So data points that group across an allocation, so to speak. But we could have other types of groupings, like maybe user-based data points that group all of that data and aggregate it over a single user or consumer. That's kind of like a potential we haven't really explored that much, but it's something that technically could be possible with the existing Kafka message data. We also would require some changes to subgraph to enable for topic and submitter whitelisting to be accommodated for a decentralized gateway scenario, because currently every time there is a topic change, it's basically which IVs are going to be used to search across the IPFS. It doesn't really matter, but it's basically something that we need to take care of to enable upgrades over time, as well as allowing different submitters to submit IPFS hashes for processing on the subgraph, so that we have, if we have multiple gateways running and multiple people reporting, all of those people need to be dynamically added to the whitelist, so that we don't really need to redeploy the subgraph every time a new gateway operator wants to get into the a gateway game, so to speak. And also, we ideally want to go from non-eventful data edge contract to an eventful data edge contract. This is because we plan to move from Gnosis to Arbitrum 1. Arbitrum 1 doesn't have call handlers, as well as call handlers are not ideal when you're talking about performance. So you want to move from a data edge non-eventful contract to an eventful contract. This has some implications in potential gas savings, but we think that given the current situation with Arbitrum 1 and how quote unquote inexpensive it is, it should be fine to use a less than optimal data edge contract for this, which would still be a lot more gas performant than having a specific contract for it, because it's just going to process call data and it's going to send all of the processing to a subgraph. That's I think pretty much it for our ideas. We're still on the RFC stage, so we're planning on the changes. We are gathering feedback, figuring out what's needed. Most of these things that I mentioned come from internal requirements that we have for things like GraphZero, or that we have over the time figured out that could be good improvements to the Oracle itself and of course the subgraph. But yeah, we're open for feedback. So yeah. And yeah, thanks for listening. And if we have any questions or feedback, I can probably address them now.
Alrighty, we've got some questions coming in through the chat, Juan, so you can have a look there.
Yep. So first of all, for Matthew, will this be designed for with future gateways in mind for World of Data services? That's actually a good question. I haven't really thought about that. It should, as long as those gateways have the same type of outputs for Kafka, they should work. The outputs are, pretty common. They're not something really subgraph specific, aside from, the query data points being referred to as subgraph data points, but it's just really groupings over queries done to a single ID. Could be an ID for a subgraph, or an ID for a file, or an ID for some other type of data service. I think that should be fairly reasonable. And the data that's coming there, it's latency, blocks behind, like freshness of the data, yada yada yada. So I don't think that's super exclusive for different data services, but it's not something that we have taken into consideration as something that could be not working. I would assume they would work just fine, but we'll have to take care of that, I think. From Derek, is participating with the QS Oracle optional for new gateway operators, or would it be required? Well, this is something that hasn't been discussed. Our position from GraphOps is that we think that any gateway operator should report QS data. It shouldn't be something that's optional, because we think that the QS data should be free for anyone to take a look at. It's super useful for indexers to know why they're not being selected by the gateway, as well as it's we think it's common sense to have that free and open for everyone to take a look at. But again, it hasn't been discussed and properly ratified by the council, which should at the end of the day be the ones to ratify this. From Mark Andre, what's the target time resolution for the data? I find the old 5-minute data point useful. We currently have the same target in mind. Like the data points that are going to be coming out from the Oracle should be the same as the old ones, so 5-minute data point intervals. But we will also have, as with the old subgraph, daily data points, so daily aggregations over all of those 5-minute intervals, as well as potentially maybe weekly if it's relevant, but we don't really know if it's relevant. I mean, currently we plan on doing the 5-minute plus the daily aggregations on the subgraph. This is from Chris. Given operating a gateway will eventually be permissionless, won't we expect new gateway operators to just launch their own QS Oracle subgraph rather than permissioning them into a single QS Oracle subgraph? Ideally, we have all of the data in a single subgraph. They could have a separate subgraph for it, yes. One of the we might need a way, as part of the whitelisting that I mentioned previously, we might need to find a way to make the registering part of a new submitter to be as permissionless as possible. It might be, given that it hasn't been ratified by the council yet, it might need to be progressively decentralized, so that if we have a registry, so to speak, it might start as kind of like a permissioned role to add new addresses as submitters, and eventually it might progress into a more decentralized and permissionless registry where anyone can submit or be added as an operator. But yes, they could very well deploy their own subgraph if they want to. Again, none of those things are ratified. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, thanks, Juan. I guess I would just kind of add on in relation to Derek's question of like, is operating the QoS oracle optional? I think in the long term, because being a pair into the protocol, which is kind of what the gateway will do, is permissionless, and anyone can do that without running, the QoS oracle. Strictly speaking, it will be optional, but we hope that there, through tools like 𝗨𝗪 that try to provide like a normalized comparative view of data across gateways, we hope there will be strong social incentives for gateway operators to report QoS data, in that kind of standardized way. I would also just on Matthew's question of will this be designed with future gateways in mind? I think like as Juan said, as much as we can, yes. But obviously the nature of what quality of service means will be different from data service to data service. And so I think like the broad framework of like extracting QoS information from the gateway, and obviously the gateway will be specific to the data service. But the framework for extracting that data, aggregating it, and then uploading it to IPFS and the data edge, that is, we'll definitely try to approach in a way that's reusable for other data services. And similarly, the subgraph, will yeah, the shape of the data might be a bit different, the schema, but the pattern should be the same.
Any more questions? Oh, sorry. Sorry, did I interrupt someone there?
I briefly unmuted, which may have caused some feedback, so my bad.
Got it. All good, all good.
I was just gonna, I guess, say like, calling out, at least just off the top of my head, and I'm sure Juan can help me out here, but like some of the like the most important improvements. I think, at the moment, the QoS data has this like blocks behind measure across all chains, and as Juan described, that isn't really a consistent measure of time. So moving to something like milliseconds behind, I think is a big improvement. I think we're definitely going to try and add more sophisticated statistics around latency, because average latency is not very useful, and something like a P99 latency would be a lot more useful for an operator. So adding, like a distribution of latencies is also something that we think would be valuable. Another I think shortcoming of V1 is that you have like a gateway operator like Edge and Node, and they're operating multiple instances of the gateway, right? Perhaps one in Europe, one in America, and one in Asia. But at the moment, the QoS statistics, even though each gateway will have a different subjective view of all of the indexers, right? Like the gateway in the US will have far more favorable statistics for US indexers, and the same would be true for obviously Asia and so on. At the moment, statistics are just aggregated over all of those instances, and so you're getting this kind of it's still useful because you get an aggregate view of your performance, but we'd like to add, that extra dimension of granularity so that the QoS stats actually, show that, this is the Edge node gateway operating in like US East that is reporting this set of stats.
Yep.
Juan, what other like big high level changes are there? Just in terms of like the data.
Yeah, I mean, for the most part, the most important ones are covered already by the presentation and by what you said. Again, some others that we were thinking about is also adding a view for or a grouping for users. Currently, the Kafka messages have a knowledge of which consumer is actually sending those queries. You could actually aggregate over consumers, have some view of, okay, this consumer has so far has had this amount of queries, this query fees paid, or this average latency, P90 latency, whatever. That could also be something that we can do. But yeah, for the most part, this trying to also have all of the B1 stuff plus all of those things that we mentioned, as granular as we can with the uniqueness of the IDs of the gateways, so that we can establish, as Chris mentioned, specific gateways with specific locations, or at least with some identifier of the relative location that they're at. Yeah, all of those things. Again, this is early in the process, so we are basically figuring out what we have available, what are the current processes doing to the data itself. Because, for example, the Kafka messages don't have a bunch of the data. Like we're currently processing standard deviation metrics and some other cool metrics in the QoS in the finalized IPFS uploaded schema, but we don't have those in the Kafka. In the Kafka messages that are coming straight from the gateway, so we have to figure out, okay, what are they doing and when are they doing those things, so we can replicate those things from B1 on the standalone Rust Oracle that we want to make. But yeah, for the most part, we'll try to add as much relevant information as we can. That's also why we're looking for feedback on this. Okay, this question from Derek: is there a way that we could incorporate some type of pulse check on allocations to identify whether or not an indexer is able to serve a query? Like, I don't know if this is something that could be done on the QoS Oracle itself would report whether that's happening even before it's being settled on chain, like the query fees are being settled on chain. But I don't think this is in scope of the Oracle itself. It's something that we have discussed at some point for graphs here, if I'm not mistaken, but not in the relatively soon to be launched things, I guess. Also, it's something that is kind of like a potentially an issue of spam of indexers, figuring out if their endpoints are working, sending all of the indexing statuses checks, maybe query checks or whatever might spam indexers, and they might want to avoid that too. So there's like some considerations that you have to take care of before you do that.
See a few people typing, so I'm assuming there's some more questions.
I can share an idea relating to Derek's question on like a pulse or health check. I think first of all, what Juan said is spot on, that you know this kind of health check or like reconciliation of like is an indexer's endpoint online and like behaving in the way that you would expect them to if it's healthy. That is something that can be implemented like client side, and it's something we've spoken about adding to GraphSeer, and so this you might see this in GraphSeer at some point. But putting kind of the client side check aside, I do think it's interesting if the gateway were to like natively expose some information about um, basically um, about its internal state, I suppose. And like all of the information that the gateway provides is subjective, and whether it flows via the V2 oracle that Juan has described, onto IPFS and via the data edge into these subgraphs, or whether the gateway serves data, at its public endpoint. Um, in both cases, the kind of trust properties of the data are the same. It's like oracle data. And so the primary benefit of like doing the whole IPFS on-chain subgraph thing is that you allow anybody to recreate, an API with historical data. But separately to that, like historical QoS data set, yeah, I imagine you could ping a gateway and just get back like a response describing, some of its internal state, including like, which gateway, which indexers it's doing business with, or which allocations it considers active or not, or perhaps even like market parameters inside the indexer selection algorithm. Um, yeah, things like that. Uh, again, this is just an idea, and I have no idea how the gateway team at Edge and Node would feel about that, but um, could be something that is done.
Awesome. Seems to be getting some pretty good response in the chats there. Um, any additional thoughts, questions on this topic here? Oh, I see Vince typing. Alrighty, I'll let Vince type there and see what the outcome is. We did have another section, but we I guess are running up close to time. So maybe what we'll do is we'll do the section, but we'll do like a shortened version, and then if we get cut off at the hour mark, then we can always bring it back. But before we do that, let me go ahead and share the POAP secret code with you all, which is a pretty fun one today. There you go. And in fact, let me send it. There you go. POAPs are awesome. So make sure you go get your POAP. Alrighty. Vince stopped typing. So, he's back again. We'll crack on with the next section. And yeah. Is there a typo? We love. Oh, Oh, yeah, that's the code. It should work as is. Um, Alrighty. Next, well, first and foremost, thank you, Juan, Chris, and the rest of the GraphOps team for that section there. Let's give you guys a round of applause. And as always, both Juan, Chris, and everyone else on the GraphOps team is always available to answer any questions. And I'm sure there'll be updates as and when things progress. As Juan mentioned, this is still kind of in the request for comment kind of stage. So yeah, I'm sure there'll be a lot of points where people can have their input. So yeah, big thanks to Juan, as Chris said, and also thanks to you, Chris, and the rest of the GraphOps team for that section there. Alrighty, let's see what we can do in the last 10 minutes. I have the good fortune of inviting a friend of mine and someone who everyone, well, most people in here know as an active contributor in the Graph ecosystem. He's also a delegator, and his name is 𝗨𝘀𝗲𝗂. 𝗨𝘀𝗲𝗂, who will shortly introduce himself, will be coming up on stage to join us for our Delegator Watch section. So as many of you know, we love to invite delegators onto IOH to share a bit about their experience delegating to indexers, maybe sharing a bit about their thoughts on what they would like to see from indexers, just so you guys can be as aware and as connected to the people ultimately that you guys serve in terms of your indexing services. So without further ado, 𝗨𝘀𝗲𝗂, welcome to the stage.
Thank you for having me as a guinea pig today. I think I was going to answer some of your questions, right?
That's correct. Yeah. So I have a bunch of questions here that I would love to ask you in a kind of back and forth style interview, and then obviously want to give the indexers some opportunity to ask you questions as well. But before we do that, we'd love to hear a bit about your background, who you are, and just a bit about you, 𝗨𝘀𝗲𝗂, because as most people might know you, but there are a few people in here who may not. So would love to start there first.
Yeah, sure. So, very long background story very quickly. I do bartending in Rotterdam, and I did teaching in Rotterdam, as in high school teaching. I did that full time, and then also the bartending on the side. So I got a little bit of money built up, and then I was like, oh, what is this cool GRT thing? Can I buy this? So I bought it. And then I started learning a lot more about the graph, and eventually I went in as a community member that got a little bit active, a lot active, and then I joined the Graph Advocates DAO. But before that, I joined all of these calls, the index office hours and the community talk and the all of the updates that I could get, because I wanted to get a good idea of who the indexes were and who I could delegate my GRT to. So I guess that's introduction.
Wonderful. Appreciate the introduction there. So let's get into it. First and foremost, I would like to ask you, when you consider when you consider delegating to indexers, what are some of the key factors that you take in mind as to which indexer you delegate to, and what are the factors that influence your decision there?
Right. So when I got in, I didn't really know anything. So first thing that I learned was there was this cool dashboard on the website where you could look at a lot of numbers that didn't mean much to me at the time. So instead of going through all the numbers and learning about them, I joined these calls. And for me, one of the, or I guess the factor that really pushed through was the community reputation. So a lot of the people that are here, a lot of the indexers, had a pretty big voice in the community, and we're always active in all the channels as well to help out community members and delegators. And those were the ones for me that was like, okay, I think I trust these people with what they're doing, and I eventually delegated to them.
Yeah, that seems to be a trend when speaking to quite a few delegators. Communication, representation, community engagement, being visible and helpful is definitely a thing that indexers can do to kind of make themselves appealing to delegators. So that's good to hear. That's something that you also value highly. On a similar thread, do you have any specific expectations or things that you look for in terms of transparency, performance, communication when it comes to picking an indexer? Like, are there specific things that really call to you?
Well, I guess two things come to mind. One is I would like to have a individual that I can speak to instead of just having a name of an indexer, so that like if there is something that I would like to ask, or if there is something that I would like to know, I could reach out to this indexer personally. So, for example, in my username, you can see that I'm with Advocates now. So if there is an indexer that is big in the graph ecosystem, I would like to see that in their name, so you know that they're with that indexer. The other thing is that I remember at the time that there were a lot of people that wanted to ask stuff about the allocations. So one thing that I was also looking into, if there were asked questions about allocations, that the indexes would respond to them. I think those were the two things that really were important to me.
Gotcha. And in terms of communications with indexers, are there any specific channels that you prefer to communicate with indexers on? And is there a particular cadence that you would like to hear from indexers? Let's say, for example, would you is a newsletter, for example, interesting for you from an indexer or something like this?
I guess to answer the first part of your question, I think the delegator indexer channel on the Graph Discord server is really nice. And just being active in the Graph Telegram channel, because I feel like a lot of questions are there. Luckily, now that we have a lot of Graph Advocates, usually the Graph Advocates will relay those questions to the indexer delegator channel. So I think that's very nice. I think a newsletter from what an indexer is doing and why would be really cool. What I myself do not really like is when we have the same indexer spamming, "Hey, we closed an allocation, please delegate to us." That I don't really like that much. So I would rather see like proactive help than self-promotion.
Gotcha. And then you mentioned some dashboards that you looked at that at the time when you looked at them didn't make much sense to you, but hopefully that has changed after getting deeper and deeper into the ecosystem. So I wonder, are there any particular metrics that you look to make your decision as to which indexer you delegate to?
I don't know if it was in the Explorer at the time, but I believe now you have the you can sort on how many query fees they processed. Correct me if that's wrong.
I believe this is the case, if I'm not mistaken.
I'm checking right now. Yeah. I think that is a very cool metric to sort on instead of total stake in the network. It's the
Nice.
default. Okay, perfect. Okay, I've not looked at the Explorer for a long time now. My apologies, guys.
Awesome. And when you look to delegate to a particular indexer, are there any specific expectations you have around rewards returns from delegators? Sorry, from indexers.
Sorry, could you repeat that question? I was reading Derek's question in the chat.
Oh, Derek's got a question. Okay. Actually, let's prioritize the questions from the indexers. Let's go with that question there.
Yeah, so I have undelegated, but that was because I needed more liquidity. So I just needed to move my GRT. That was nothing to do with an indexer. I have seen a lot of graph advocates that were asking questions when an indexer didn't close their allocation in time. And then, so I guess that means that people lost their rewards, which was not good to see. So I think that is something that indexers would definitely avoid, but I think that's pretty self-explanatory.
Amazing. I also want to make sure that, I give space for indexer questions. I can see another one coming from Chris. So, Colson, would you like to address that one there?
Yeah, so just so I have it clear, a liquid delegation protocol basically means that people can switch a delegation between indexers more rapidly than with the withdrawal period. Yeah. Okay. No, I think that's really cool. I think that maybe puts a little bit more pressure on indexers to perform. I'm not sure if that's a good or a bad thing, but I think the option for delegators to do that is a very cool one. And I think you're almost out of time, Abel.
Yeah, we're running up on. So yeah, and I've put a link there to Tenderize Me, which is a liquid staking uh well, sorry, yeah, a liquid staking protocol that has some interesting aspects to it. I think there are definitely some positives, but we have to be very careful about how these things come to be, because effectively, if these things get really big, they can start to become kingmakers, and be a kind of a point of centralization, which has been a hot topic in the community. But yeah, it's still very much interesting, and excited to see how things develop there. Okay, I have much more questions, but looks like we're up on time. If I guess if yeah, I think it probably makes sense to do another one of these where we have a bit more time. But yeah, just want to say a massive thank you to you, Colson, for coming on and sharing some of your thoughts as a active member in the community and also a delegator. So just give you a round of applause there.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for your help doing community talk today. So I guess it goes both ways. Thank you.
Of course, always here to help, my friend. You're a valued member of the community, so yeah, glad to be useful, my friend. And yeah, hope to have you back again. And yeah, hope to have everyone else back again. Thank you so much for all of you for coming along to today's Index Office Hours. It was very, very well, I found it to be very, very insightful. I hope that you guys did too. Also very entertaining as well. As always, we will have this same time every Tuesday, 6 p.m. UTC. So we look forward to seeing you all again next week at the same time. Take care, everyone, and have a wonderful rest of your week. Bye-bye.